Morning Year 11, so I'm hopeful that this will be our last online lesson and you can finally come back into my classroom next week. So which different types of texts could you be asked to write for paper 2 question 5 and what does DAForest stand for? Give yourself 5 minutes to have a go at these questions and then move on to the next slide to see the answer. So as a reminder then, last lesson we were having a think about persuasive writing devices, but we also had a look at the previous lesson, how to set out the different types of texts. So today we're going to focus on actually producing a piece of writing, okay? So we are going to create an article today. So I just wanted to remind you of the layout features before we started. So for an article, they'll be looking for you to have a headline or a title and to use clear paragraphs throughout. You do not need to draw pictures and you do not need to set it out in columns, okay? Those are the only two structural features that they're going to be looking out for when they're marking your work. So we are actually going to answer this question that we had a look at the beginning of the week during today's lesson, okay? So you need to be thinking about how you are going to respond to this question. So first of all, it says snow seems like it is picturesque, exciting and fun, but in reality it causes accidents, inconvenience and economic disruption. Write an article for a broadsheet newspaper in which you explain your point of view on the issue. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to gap it, okay? So what type of text am I writing? Well, I'm writing an article. So that is my genre. It's got to be an article. The audience, it's for a broadsheet newspaper. We spoke about that the other day. So that means it's got to be a sophisticated reader. So it's not going to be slang. It's going to make sure that it's nice and formal. And then I am explaining my point of view on the issue. So that is the purpose. So the first thing I need to decide is what is my point of view on this topic? Do I think it's picturesque, exciting and fun? Or do I agree that it causes accidents, inconvenience and economic disruption? So just spend 5 minutes now having a think about which way you feel towards this topic. So do you think it's just exciting, fun and picturesque? Or can you see the reality that it causes accidents, inconvenience and economic disruption? So we're just going to spend today's lesson having a look at an example together that I've put together, okay? Just so you can understand exactly how we should structure something like this, okay? So my example is going to have a look at this idea that snow is disruptive, okay? So I'm not going for the idea that it's picturesque and exciting, I'm going for the disruption. And then this is how I'm going to structure it. So I'm going to open with a powerful opening statement that clearly states that snow is disruptive, okay? Then I'm going to briefly discuss any counter arguments. So that's where people could say, but it is pretty, it is picturesque. And I'm obviously going to say that that doesn't matter, you know, because obviously there's more dangerous things out there than this. Then I'm going to look at my first point. So I'm going to specifically focus on the disruption it causes to education. And then my second point is that I'm going to think about how it might impact the most vulnerable in society. Okay, I'm also going to use the previous text that we've studied for these questions. So I'm going to talk about the Mount Everest scenario and obviously how snow, you know, killed a lot of people up there. So I'm going to include some information from the text itself. And then I'm going to conclude by obviously stating my point and asking people to feel the same way as I do. Because this is obviously an explain, I don't need to be aggressive in getting them to think that I am right. But it is important for them to, you know, clearly understand exactly what it is I'm trying to get across, you know, that snow is disruptive. Okay then, so here's an example of my first paragraph. So this is me stating my argument, okay? Snow joke. What's that? It's a headline, it's a title, it's going to grab the reader's attention, okay? So imagine this. You wake up on a freezing February morning to the blistering wind hurling wave after wave of fresh snow at your window. You desperately want to stay in the warm cocoon of your bedsheets, but the alarm clock forces you to get up and assess the severity of the weather outside. Apocalyptic. grumbling to yourself, you realise it's time to wrap up and face the Arctic conditions outside as it's Tuesday and you're due at work in half an hour. It's official, snow is no laughing matter. Okay, so which techniques have I used here then to begin to explain my point of view on this issue? Well, I started off by clearly stating how I feel about the snow, haven't I? Words like apocalyptic, grumbling to myself, Arctic conditions, snow is no laughing matter. I'm clearly not going for the idea that it's picturesque and beautiful, am I? I'm clearly making it very obvious that I'm not happy about it. Okay, so my point of view is clear in that first paragraph. It's very obvious how I feel about this weather. Then I'm going to move on to my counter argument paragraph. So it could be argued that snowfall does bring natural joy and tranquility to the usual hectic chaos that engulfs us on a daily basis. However, there are far more extreme consequences that occur in this type of weather than there first seems to be. So this is my counter argument. Okay, so I've thought about what people might say and then I've already argued against it so they can't say that I'm wrong. So the next thing I'm going to move on to is my main argument. So take the disruption to education, for example. Last year, over 200 schools across Derbyshire were closed at the end of March due to heavy snowfall. That's thousands of GCSE children missing vital hours of learning to instead don their winter woollies and rekindle their childhood memories of snowball fights and extreme sledging. What an utter waste of time. My daughter's school closed for over a week, just before mock exams took place. Did she spend her bonus week off revising? No. Her days were filled with binging Netflix in her fluffy pyjamas or catching up with friends on social media. It's no surprise that her January mocks consisted of a long line of twos, resulting in one very unhappy teenager. Furthermore, as a result of this careless teenage behaviour, the NHS reported a catastrophic rise in admissions to A&E, with countless broken bones, hundreds of black eyes, and in severe cases, death. Heavy snowfall is an epidemic that sweeps through the countryside, taking with it our education, our livelihoods, and unfortunately, our children. So, this is my first point of the argument. I've spoken about the disruption that it causes to education. I've used statistics, I have used my opinion, I have used listing, I've used exaggeration, I've used the rule of three. Okay, so you can say that I have successfully used deforest in my piece of work. So that is my second paragraph and my third paragraph. This is my fourth paragraph. Have we ever stopped to consider the effect of harsh weather conditions on those most vulnerable in society? Rhetorical question. The elderly, the disabled, and those living in housing that is not fit for purpose? Rhetorical question. Those dour-faced old dears that sit hunched over a feeble coal fire as their central heating is broken, having not been to the local shops for 3 days to buy the basic necessities. It pains me to think of the endless amount of pensioners who wait patiently for assistance in our treacherous conditions, but it never arrives. These harmless humans are spending the last precious months of their lives shivering in a life-size freezer that may never thaw. So there we've got obviously a opinion. Okay, and then it goes on to say, so unfortunately, I've experienced the wrath of extreme snowfall on a personal level. Experienced climber Matt Dickinson and I were amongst a group of climbers who set out to conquer Everest in June 2014. The trip got off to a fabulous start. Everyone was in great spirits, laughing and nattering away as we ascended. That was until the beast hit us. Out of nowhere, what can only be described as an apocalyptic vision swept in from the east, and a tumultuous roar of thunder bellowed through the high heavens. A furious snowstorm followed, hitting us from every direction and knocking us off course. Men were stranded, fighting for their lives and crying for their loved ones. 33 men and women were lost that day due to the fierce power of Mother Nature, a day I shall never forget. So I've included an anecdote here to back up what I've said. So it doesn't just cause problems to, education and elderly vulnerable people, but I've actually used the text that we've been studying to come up with this personal anecdote and talk about, people who are exploring on a higher level as well. So now imagine the same February morning, but with no snow, no mist, no fog, just bright jovial sunshine and a clear blue sky. Are teenagers wanting to snuggle up in pyjamas watching Netflix? Are people's lives being put at risk? Have you got to force your way into work through the congested streets and snowdrifts? Absolutely not. You can begin your day peacefully. So I've finished it by concluding and saying that, snow isn't beautiful and picturesque. I've outlined all of the issues. We'd be much happier if it didn't exist. So, obviously, we've taken today's lesson to have a look at an example of a written response. My hope is then when you come back into the academy next week, we can get on with writing our own. But I really want you to just make sure that you understand exactly what the task is asking you to do and exactly how your response should look.